everyone, Emily here from Emily Reads, and today I have my August wrap up. So, in August 2022, I read 6 books. So, not as much as I have in June and July, but August was back to school for me. I'm a special education teacher at a high school level, and I moved programs, I moved classrooms, and it has been an interesting start. There is no tired like beginning of the year teacher tired. So I've been coming home and just crashing and burning on the sofa at like 6 o'clock at night. This week has not been a good week for me headache wise either. I'm a migraine sufferer, so the last week of August has been just one round after another of a migraine. So reading has been slower once back to school started, which I knew that was going to happen. But I did get around to reading 6 books, so let's dive right into those books. So the first book I read was The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie, and this won the National Book Award when it came out. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.75 stars. I really liked being able to read. About the story's about Junior, and he is a Native American living on a reservation, and he really he's a budding cartoonist, and he is growing up on the Spokane Indian Reservation, and he realizes that in order to achieve success, in order to achieve his dreams, he needs to no longer go to school on the reservation, but he goes to a school in a nearby town. It's about 20 miles away, I want to say. And so he goes to an all-white school. And at the school, they have an Indian mascot. So it's about him navigating that in-between world of not fitting in the new school, and also his best friend feels like he betrayed him because he chose to go to an all-white school. I really enjoyed this book, and feel like that's something that it was about something that we don't really read about or talk about and learn about, so I thought it was an important book to read. The author is not without his controversy. Please Google search that. That for some that might influence your choice with whether or not you want to pick up this book. But I did enjoy the book. The next book I read, sorry, my books are slipping out of my grip. The next book I read is Fool's Assassin by Robin Hobb, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. This is the 14th book in the realm of the Elderling, the first book in the last trilogy, so the first book in the Fitz and the Fool trilogy. I absolutely loved this book. We are back with Fitz, and the characters associated with Fitz. I can't really do too much of a wrap up because so much of what I want to say would spoil a whole ton if you have not read any of the Realm of the Elderling books. But I'm going to tell you, Robin Hobb introduced a new character, and I absolutely adore this new character. I maybe have gotten a little melodramatic while I was reading this and was like, I would die for this character, because this character is just such a precious character. There was a moment where I felt like it dragged a little bit. When we were first introduced to this new character and some things about the new character, and I was just kind of like, okay, come on, Hobb, I think we get it. But about 100 but after a while I was like, no, there's a reason why Hobb is taking her time on this. Like, this is an important thing, this is an important piece, this character is very important to our world, and there's a reason why Hobb took her time and did the explaining that she did. And I just needed to trust Robin Hobb. So 5 out of 5 stars, like Robin Hobb, true to Robin Hobb form, gut-wrenching, there's so many moments with the new character that I was just like, yep, I understand your feelings. I understand where you're coming from with regards to um, this gut wrenching, heartbreaking event that occurred in your life. So, so good. Cannot wait to read book two. I just wish this all did not come at when I'm back to school, because I so want to read book two, and I know it's going to take me a while to read book two in the Fitz and Fool trilogy, um, simply because my brain just it's not there. It's all on the things that I have to do for school. Um, but again, also as always, if you've never read Robin Hobb, pick her up. The next book I read is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. And this is the first ever Butler book that I've ever read. And I gave this 4.75 out of 5 stars. I super enjoyed it. So the premise of this book is Dana is living, it's in 1976, I want to say. So she's living in 1976. She is African American. She is married. She's an interracial couple. And she and her husband have just moved into a new home. And as they're unpacking, she is transported back in time to pre-Civil War South on a plantation. And there she meets Rufus, who is the son of the plantation owner. And there is something that ties her to Rufus. And she has to, like, she's drawn back in time to save him. And each time that she's drawn back, her time spent in the past goes longer and longer. And of course, more and more perilous for her. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was I think it's a very important read, as far as its depictions of slavery, of what happens. I thought there's a point in time when she talks about how, like, because she spent so much more time in on the plantation, that started to feel more like home than the home that they just moved into. So that was very intriguing, how the time spent in the South affected not just the people around her and herself, like while she was in the South, pre-Civil War, but also how that impacted her when she came back to modern times. There were a couple of things that I wanted Butler to develop a little bit more, but at the same, like how this time travel impacted her husband. But that's not what the story is about. The story is about how slavery impacts African Americans. So for like if it were to discuss how it impacted the husband, that would have been a completely different story and not the story that Butler is telling. So I had to let that go, because I wanted to make sure I enjoyed it for what this book is. It is a really good read. I did like the fact, yeah, I don't know what I was going to just say with that. I think it's an important read. So I am excited. This is, like I said, this is my first Octavia Butler read. I think it's a very good introduction to Butler. Again, not having read her other works, but I think if you are someone who likes historical fiction and you're not sure about sci-fi, this is a good book for you to read, because the sci-fi elements really is just a time travel. It really reads more like a historical fiction social commentary. So again, 4.75 for this. The next book I read was a reread, and after reading Robin Hobb and then Kindred, I needed to shift gears, because Fool's Assassin and Kindred are both very heavy books, subject matter wise and emotional impact wise. And so this was a reread for me. I reread Beach Read by Emily Henry, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. And yes, it does deal with some heavy themes. So this is about January and Augustus, and um, they both have a beach house for the summer, and both are authors. Augustus writes like very emotionally dark, kind of not contemporary literature. And January writes um, happy, happily ever after romantic comedies. And they both decide, you know what, we're going to take a bet that the other cannot write the other's the other cannot write the other's style of literature. So January has to write like an emotionally gripping novel, and Augustus has to write a novel that has a happily ever after. Um, and so that's the premise of the story. There's another side reason why January is at this beach house. It is her father's. There's a secret behind her father having this beach house. Um, like I said, it's pretty tropey rom com. There are some heavier themes, but I like Emily Henry's sense of humor, and of course, I like having a happy ending. So that's why I enjoyed it. Just so you're aware, there is a steamy scene in here. So, beach read. Then the next book I read, and this also was a reread for me, was Cynthia Voigt's Izzy Willy Nilly. And this book I gave 4.5 stars. And this tells the story of Izzy, who she gets into, she goes to a party. She's a cheerleader. She's a sophomore. She's asked out to this party by a high school senior. And he has been drinking, and he drives her home, and they get into a car accident. He walks away from the car accident. Both her legs are broken, and one is so severe it's basically crushed, and they have to amputate it. And so this book is about the impact of that on her life and her friendships. How do her friends respond to that? And then the development of a new friendship with a very socially awkward girl at school. But that friendship develops when her other friends abandon her because they don't know how to handle interacting with her now that she has lost one of her legs. This was written, I think it was published in 1986. Yes, it was published in 1986. So just beware, there is kind of some dated themes and some kind of dated ideas in this book. Her physical therapist is an African American woman, and there are definitely some dated ways that she interacts with her. Yeah, but I do think that this was a good book in how it dealt with, what do I do now? Like how do I adjust to life now? So again, 4.5 stars. And then finally, the last book I read was Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare, and this is the first book in the Infernal Devices series. So this is set in like Victorian times London, and I have read her Mortal Instruments series. I read all 6 books like years ago, and I thought they were good, but not great. This book I gave 3 stars, and this story is about Tessa Gray, and she comes from New York to London because her brother had traveled to London and writes her a letter saying like, come to London. And when she gets there, she basically becomes captured by 2 sisters called the Dark Sisters, and they hold her captive. And basically, she learns. Sorry, I'm looking at the flap because in my summary, I don't want to give too many spoilers. So I'm just checking to make sure I'm not giving too many spoilers. But at any rate, so Tessa Gray comes from New York to London, and she's kidnapped by these dark sisters. They're two sisters who basically reveal like you can change shapes, and so she's a shift shaper where like if she has like an item of a person, she can then change into that person. Um, and she does get rescued from them, of course, by the shadow hunters. Um, and Will Herondale apparently is the main anti-hero shadow hunter. And so their big thing is, so the Dark Sisters said that they were working for the Magister, and so they're trying to like figure out who that person is and defeat that person in as they think that he's raising this army of like animatrons, um, and trying to bring those animatrons to life. I gave this 3 stars simply because I felt like a lot of the plot points and a lot of like the characters and the character development, I was like, I feel like I read that before in Mortal Instruments. This reminds me of this in Mortal Instruments, and this reminds me of that in Mortal Instruments. And oh, twist, same thing as in Mortal Instruments. So I just felt like it was a rehash, and I was disappointed because people have said this series is better than Mortal Instruments, and I didn't think so. I thought it was about the same. Um, and again, it could be I'm an adult reading a young adult novel. Maybe that's why. I don't know. But I have book 2 and book 3, and after reading this, I was like, I don't know if I really want to read book 2 and book 3. Like, I don't know. I think I might be able to just Google, like, find a plot summary of book 2 and book 3 and be like, okay, I'm good. So that was my August. Um, the best book I read, of course, Robin Hobb. I mean, the worst rated book that I read was Clockwork Angel, so I didn't have a bad reading month. I had a really good reading month. But that being said, that's what I read in August. I'm looking forward to September. I'm really hoping I can get rid of these migraines, and that school will kind of settle so I can get into a better rhythm between work and reading, because reading for me really, truly is my self care. That being said, what was your favorite book that you read in August, and what are you looking forward to reading in September? Have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for watching.